Hello, friends and fellow seekers. Welcome back to the Law of One Spiritual Advice podcast. My name is Elle, and today we are going to be talking about the pyramids, how and why the pyramids were built, how the blocks were moved, can I move blocks by myself, the law of confusion and free will for the skeptical people. So I'm going to save that law of confusion thing for the very end, but I do suggest that you stick around to the end because it's, in my opinion, the most important part of the whole thing, or at least the most interesting part. So if I could just ask you to smash the old like button on this podcast like you did on the last one, it really helped the podcast make its way out into the ethers to more people to see versus if you did not do it. So thank you so much, everyone. Let us begin. So let's start with what is the purpose of the pyramids. I am just going to read you some quotes from the Law of One material, and then I will break them down, or at least parts I will break down as to what I feel maybe needs a little bit of elaboration. So let's start with the purpose of the pyramids. In session 2.4, the questioner asks, were you responsible for the building of the pyramid, and what was the purpose of the pyramid? Ra answers, I am Ra. The larger pyramids were built by our ability using the forces of one. The stones are alive. It has not been so understood by the mind-body-spirit distortions of your culture. The purpose of the pyramids were two. Firstly, to have a properly oriented place of initiation for those who wish to become purified or initiated channels for the Law of One. 2. We wish then to carefully guide the initiates in developing a healing of the people whom they sought to aid of the planet itself. Pyramid after pyramid charged by the crystal and the initiate were designed to balance the incoming energy of the one creation with the many and multiple distortions of the planetary mind-body-spirit. In this effort, we were able to continue the work that our brothers within the Confederation had effected through the building of other crystal-bearing structures, and thus complete a ring, if you will, of these about the Earth's as this instrument would have us vibrate its surface. End of quote. Okay, so the first thing that they're trying to say is that they built the pyramids as a place for initiation. In other parts of the material, I believe they talk about how they would basically send somebody into the pyramid and they would go through a certain initiation process, which is sort of like a near-death experience, if you will, where they go and they sort of die to their smaller selves and they are born into their larger being, and they realize the oneness of them and the creation about them. And with that realization, they become more purified in getting rid of some of the distortions of their being, and are then a more pure channel for the Law of One. In other words, they're a more pure channel to have energy flow through them and be a sort of healing conduit for themselves and for the planet and for others. And then 2 is basically kind of the same thing. It's basically like the pyramids themselves offered there's a lot of energy that comes into the earth, and with all of the different peoples on earth, they kind of distort the energy into various ways that aren't particularly healthy for the planet. And the pyramids, not just the Great Pyramid, but all these other pyramids that you see on Earth and other sort of structures of similar type crystal type structures were also created just to help balance, you could say, the energy of the planet, so that the planet could, I guess, operate in a more healthy manner as well. And then this is kind of the fun part about, can you move the blocks yourselves, or how were the blocks moved? So in session 3.8, the questioner asks, how were the blocks moved? Ra answers, I am Ra. You must picture the activity within all that is created. The energy is, though finite, quite large compared to the understanding distortion of your peoples. This is an obvious point well known to your peoples, but little considered. This energy is intelligent. It is hierarchical. Much as your mind-body-spirit complex dwells within a hierarchy of vehicles and retains therefore the shell or shape or field and the intelligence of each ascendingly intelligent or balanced body, so does each atom of such a material as rock. When one can speak to that intelligence, the finite energy of the physical or chemical rock body is put into the contact with the infinite power which is resident in the more well-tuned bodies, be they human or rock. With this connection made, a request may be given. The intelligence of infinite rockness communicates to its physical vehicle, and that splitting and moving which is desired is then carried out through the displacement of the energy field of rockness, from finity to a dimension which we may conveniently call simply infinity. In this way, that which is required is accomplished due to the cooperation of the finite understanding of the Creator indwelling in the living rock. This is, of course, the mechanism by which many things are accomplished which are not subject to your present means of physical analysis of action at a distance. End of quote. And so that's kind of a very fancy way of just saying that they kind of did it by telekinesis, maybe is a way of putting it. It's almost like as someone or an entity is very purified in their self, in their chakras of their bodies, and they can be balanced up into the red, orange, yellow, green, indigo, violet chakras. They go up into the indigo ray, which is like the third eye. Right there is where you are dealing with the law of one, and you are dealing with infinity. And so you can kind of communicate from infinity to finity, and you can ask certain things to happen. And because you are more in harmony with all of creation, you're asking in a certain way which can be understood by the creation, and which many sort of magical physical things can happen. Another way that I like to think about this is you kind of have to go to other quotes in the material where they talk about the creation of the universe. And to my understanding, it goes something like this, where there is free will. That free will found a focus, and that focus was love, or the creative principle. And from that love then created light, and the light is everything that you see, right? Everything in creation is made of light, which is rotating at certain speeds of rotation, which then is manifested as physical atoms and things of that nature. So an easy way to sort of say it is that once you become, I suppose, purified to a certain extent, then you can communicate through love, which then can communicate to the light and have the light do certain things, such as make a rock come into a certain shape or move things from one place to another with a sort of telekinesis, if you will. Isn't that fun? And how would you do that, right? This is kind of an important part. It's one of the next questions that come right after, and it talks about faith and the infinite path versus sort of the non-faith / measurement finite path. So in session 3.9, the questioner asks, I'm reminded of this statement approximately, if you had enough faith, you could say to a mountain to move, and the mountain would move. I assume that this is approximately what you are saying, and I am assuming that if you are fully aware of the law of one, then you are able to do these things. Is that correct? Ra answers, I am Ra. The vibratory distortion of sound faith is perhaps one of the stumbling blocks between those of what we may call the infinite path and those of the finite proving / understanding. You are precisely correct in your understanding of the congruency of faith and intelligent infinity. However, one is a spiritual term, the other more acceptable perhaps to the conceptual framework distortions of those who seek with the measure and pen. End of quote. And so as they highlight here, it is only through faith that you, in my opinion, can, I suppose, make it up into the indigo ray, and from that area of your consciousness, you are able to communicate with other parts of creation. And, the very end part, they kind of make a cheeky thing about, the congruency of faith and intelligent infinity. And they kind of saying faith and the term intelligent infinity are the same thing. However, intelligent infinity sounds more proper to somebody who seeks with the measure and pen, such as like a scientist, somebody who isn't particularly a faithful person, but they'd like to make sense of things, and we're going to make sense of them by saying intelligent infinity rather than just saying, in a more spiritual term, faith. However, there is a little bit of an addition onto this, that most people probably wouldn't be able to just create a pyramid or to move things telekinetically unless they were very purified of all their flaws. And so this part of the quote kind of goes into that, how a mass mind could maybe move a mountain. However, an individual, not so much unless they're very purified or pure in their seeking. And I would just state that most of us are not of that nature. Or you wouldn't probably be listening to this, you just understand it naturally. So, in session 3.10, the other question right after that, they state, questioner, then if an individual is totally informed with respect to the law of one and lives and is the law of one, such things as building of a pyramid by direct mental effort would be commonplace. Is that what I am to understand? Am I correct? Ra answers, I am Ra. You are incorrect, in that there is a distinction between the individual power through the law of one and the combined or societal memory complex mind-body-spirit understanding of the law of one. In the first case, only the individual purified of all flaws could move a mountain. In the case of mass understanding of unity, each individual may contain an acceptable amount of distortion, and yet the mass mind could move mountains. End of quote. And so I'd like to highlight that one for many reasons, in that, just nothing to do necessarily even with pyramids, but just with the nature of our earth and society right now. We often think that we should seek alone and try to be good people just by ourselves, which we should, right? There's to serve one is to serve all. However, if we get together with everyone in a more communal effort, in a more societal effort, and we understand these sort of laws of unity and law of one, each of us can still contain distortion and our own issues within ourselves, but it's a lot easier to affect change when we're doing it all together. Like in other parts of the material, they mention if the people of Earth could all point the compass in the same direction, we could create miracles. We could enter the fourth density. We could solve a lot of the many, many issues that exist on Earth right now. But because we're in a sort of divide and conquer state by many of the negative elites who pit us against each other, we often, have more distortion on Earth, more issues than we have in the direction of healing. And so it's just a little reminder that the more that we can come together in understanding in society about unity and love and acceptance, the more that we will be able to manifest a lot better existence than maybe some of us exist in right now. Okay, and we've basically made it to the end. This is, in my opinion, the more fun / interesting part of these quotes, which is the law of confusion, or they also call it the law of free will, in which they talk about how the pyramid, the Great Pyramid, for example, appears to be made by people, right? It appears to be made by people, but it's not. It's actually created by thought. But why wouldn't they just make one solid big pyramid, right? Wouldn't that make a lot more sense to just make one big solid thing instead of making it seem like a bunch of blocks were placed? Well, let us go into this. So, in session 3.11, the questioner says, "Was the pyramid then built by the mutual action of many of your people?" Ra says, "I am Ra. The pyramids which we thought/built were constructed from thought forms created by our social memory complex." Questioner continues on, "Then the rock was created by thought in place rather than moved from somewhere else, is that correct?" Ra says, "We built with the everlasting rock the Great Pyramid, as you call it. Other of the pyramids were built with stone moved from one place to another." And I'll just stop there quickly. With everlasting rock, I suppose that just means rock made from complete thought versus some of the other pyramids which were built with stone moved from one place to another. Continuing on, the questioner says, "This is slightly trivial, but I was wondering why, in that case, the pyramid was made of many blocks rather than the whole thing being created at once." Ra answers, "I am Ra. There is a law which we believe to be one of the more significant primal distortions of the law of one. That is the law of confusion. You have called this the law of free will. We wish to make an healing machine or time-space ratio complex which was as efficacious as possible. However, we did not desire to allow the mystery to be penetrated by the peoples in such a way that we became worshipped as builders of a miraculous pyramid. Thus, it appears to be made, not thought." End of quote. And so they made the pyramid, which appears to be made by many blocks, and it appears to be like the possibility that it was made by people. Why? Because they want to respect the free will of people who maybe seek infinity versus those who seek with the measure and pen. They don't want to make it so clear and obvious that it was made by thought. Why? Because we are in the third density, which is the density of choice. And so they would like to give us that choice as to how we may see things. Do you want to see the possibility that this was made by infinity and by thought, and that all thoughts can be things, etc., etc.? Or would you like to just think that, no, that's all silly, faith is dumb, these were all made by slaves who were cut the stone and moved it one by one up on the other, blah, 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 blah. And so is the nature of a lot of the wise seekers on this planet that have come. They used to talk about even, Jesus or Jehoshua or whatever they call it in this material, where, he would even speak in parables to people. And that's sort of the idea, is to respect the free will of the listeners. They respect the free will of them to to decide how they want to see this material. Whereas you could see it if you were thinking with infinity and you were open to that sort of thing, you could see how they were built by thought and by faith. However, if you just thought that was all silly, well, then the law of confusion shall reign free, and you can just decide whatever the heck you want. And so a good seeker sort of does that, or a good teacher maybe sort of does that, where they allow the free will of the individual to make the ultimate choice. They don't just hold the truth in front of them and shove it in their face and go, this is the way it is. How do you not see infinity? Like, clearly this is the only way it could be. And this big miraculous pyramid was built by aliens, and that's the way it was, right? But no, that's not how it works. We are in the density of choice, and so they would like to keep that choice, keep that law of confusion, that law of free will intact, and have the free will of the seeker come to the conclusions that they wish to come to. And furthermore, they also don't want to become worshipped as builders of a great miraculous pyramid, because in our history, all these pyramids and all these crystals and healing techniques over the years were distorted by negative seekers who took these tools and these ideas which were meant to be given to us to heal. And what often happened is, over the many, many, many years, negative seekers would transform those types of things into things of like power. Like, they even talk, I didn't include the quote in this particular podcast, but they even talked about how after they sort of left our sphere and their consciousness sort of left, these pyramids were actually changed in a way. Like, they had granite atop the pyramid at first, which was just a structural thing to assist with the energy of the pyramid, and it was changed, the cap of the stone of the pyramid was changed into some golden cap of the pyramid, which then was used, only as a place of royalty. Only those who have power and royalty can come to this place, right? And so they changed it from a service to others type of tool into a service to self tool, to be like, only people who are important get to come here, versus, seeing everyone as one and everyone as metaphysical equals, and, those who wish to heal and be initiated by this pyramid, come on in, let's help you out, let's get you initiated. Instead, they changed it to, a power structure where it's like, this is our worship temple and this is ours and not yours. It's not for peasants like you. and so is the nature of many things on our planet, which were once created to serve others and to be wonderful healing machines, and were then, transformed into something of a negative nature, in which, they wish to avoid. And so they sort of avoid that by giving everyone the free will opportunity not to just see the pyramid as something that was miraculously made by thought, and therefore proving to everyone that infinity exists, because proving isn't really a thing of infinity. It's more of a faith thing that brings you closer to infinity. You can't really prove infinity to people. If you did, you would be disrespecting their free will, and you don't really want to do that, because that's one of the first distortions of the universe, is free will. And so it's kind of an important thing that you keep that in the top of your mind when dealing with anyone. It's, even when you attempt to heal someone, right? You wouldn't go to heal somebody who doesn't want your help. You don't want to go and try to help somebody who doesn't want your help. You would be disrespecting their free will. You're better off to try your best when somebody comes to you and asks you for healing or asks you for your opinion. Then, you're free to give what you can. And so is the nature of the pyramids, and so is the nature of consciousness and this faith thing that we are trying to communicate to each other in podcasts such as this. And so, my friends, I thought this was a bit of an interesting one today, a little bit different from the usual type of podcast, talking about pyramids and things like that. So I hope you enjoyed, and if you did enjoy the podcast, once again, could you just hit the like button? It really helps with getting this material out there. Leave me a comment, make sure you subscribe. I read all the comments, and other than that, freely give, freely receive. I'm getting kind of sick of putting this at the end of every podcast, especially when I haven't had many new joiners listeners in the last month or so, but I still have to do it. It's just the nature of what I'm trying to do here with the freely give, freely receive. So if you appreciate my service in this area and you have a little bit of abundance to share, I would really appreciate if you jumped on my Patreon or shoot me a one-time PayPal. You can do that at theoneinfinitecreator.com and just scroll down to the support section and there's some links there. It really does help me in the longevity of keeping this material going out there, helps me with expanding these services and all that type of wonderful stuff. And for all of those that do, I love you. Thank you so much. And for those who can't maybe afford it, don't have the abundance to give, don't worry, still love you all the same. And so thank you, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week. Take care.